Good afternoon. Welcome to Industry Chats. I'm Jasmine Saliga, the founder of Affixify and your weekly host. I am very excited to have my friend Ed Clark on today with HotelTech Recruitment. Ed has so much to share. In fact, I was just telling him on the pre-show that I can't wait for some kind of unique content that he's going to bring us today. This is the first recruiter we've ever had on the show, which I absolutely love. And I met you on LinkedIn. So proof that this network really does have benefits. It really has fruits. And you and I kind of started talking about ways we could partner. How can we work together? And we knew pretty quickly that we wanted to have you on the show. And so today we are super excited to dive into, I've never said this before, but everything from rugby to hotel tech and recruitment. So I will hand over the reins for a minute. Ed, would you introduce yourself? Tell us about what you do. And I am personally excited to hear how you went from rugby to hotel tech. Like, I'm dying to hear this story. So tell us about you and welcome.
Let's go. Yes, thank you so much, Jasmine, for having me on your channel. I really appreciate it. So, okay, I'll talk about my background and eventually how I got from rugby to recruitment. So bear with me, I'll be as quick as possible. So I'm Ed, short for Edouard. I'm French. I'm half French and half English. Lived around the world since a young age. So started off by being born in Paris and then spent my childhood and adolescence in England, Belgium, and Brazil. And then I pursued my dream of becoming a rugby player by moving by myself to South Africa to play for a pretty big rugby club down in Durban, where I learned lots for about a year. And then I moved to Scotland to play semi-pro rugby. And after about 6 months, I realized I needed to secure my future by going to university. So I didn't know much what I should go into, so I just did business management. And whilst I was studying business management, I came across the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I know a lot of people know about. I know some people are against it. Some people think it's a bit extreme, but for me, it solidified. Well, actually, it introduced me to entrepreneurship, and I fell in love with it. So after university, quite quickly, I set up my own estate agency, specializing in student accommodation. And with only £3,000 and two partners, we grew it up from scratch in Manchester, the northwest of England, and grew that for about 5 years. And during those 5 years, I found a love for SaaS tools because it really unlocked growth. So once I had 20 landlords who had about 5 properties each, it started becoming really hard to run a stable ship without technology. As soon as we used technology, that really unlocked the potential to the point where we eventually sold the business 5 years later.
Okay.
So after that, I didn't know what to do. I thought I'd go into finance. Quickly found out it wasn't for me, and ended up speaking to a recruiter who got me in touch with his neighbor. Happened to be a very wealthy individual who made his fortune in student accommodation.
Wow.
And he had a construction company at the time in Manchester who basically built luxury residential properties, very high-end properties. So basically building properties for your football players from Manchester United and Manchester City, for the football fans. And so he invited me to his multi-million-pound house, sat me down, and after an hour he said, "Ed, I want to build my first apart hotel, and I want you to build the brand, operations, and tech stack from scratch." And I don't know, some people go through this where you're given an opportunity, even though you have no idea how you're going to do it, you just got to grab it. And so I just said to him, yeah, let's do it. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but if you put your trust in me, then, then I should probably go for it. And so I spent the first 6 months realizing, oh shit, I need a PMS, and what's an RMS, and figured out what that is. And then, oh, I need a head housekeeper, and I need, front office manager. And so I basically, build the brand operations from scratch, but also the tech stack and use, off the shelf typical SaaS tools. And we actually went with Muse and a couple of other systems, systems, RMS and all that. And then practically only a few days before opening, that's when COVID hit. And then it was just chaos. And eventually, the company folded and I had to move. So eventually with my ex, we decided to move to Berlin in Germany. And I initially was looking for sales positions, but came across Numa, who were looking for a director of launch. For those who don't know what launch is, it's basically a fancy word for project management for pre-openings.
Sure.
And so Numa was an apart hotel startup at the time. They're now a scale up. And I basically helped them pre-open about 30 of their hotels across Europe.
Wow. Okay.
Good at change management, really enjoyed that side and loved the recruitment side of things as always. And they eventually promoted me to, well, gave me a second job at the same time to be the interim head of HR. And at that point, I had met 3 individuals that became my friends, and we decided to leave our jobs and set up our own hostel concept. And so we built one last year in May, just south of Berlin. And at that point, I realized that I was done with operations. I knew I was good at operations. I was good at project management, but I didn't necessarily jump out of bed every morning to do it.
Yeah.
And so I decided to write down on a list of paper, what am I good at and what do I actually enjoy? And 2 of those things were recruitment. I've always loved recruitment and onboarding as well. I've always been really good at it. I was good at building teams.
Yeah.
Just had for it. And I've also learned from a lot of mistakes that I've made from having a lot of responsibility since the beginning of my career. But I also loved SaaS tools. I loved property management tools, for estate agency, but I was immersed in the whole HotelTech stack.
Sure.
And I was thinking to myself, I've done about over 100 demos, and I thought to myself, I can do what this account executive is doing much better. I could be much more excitable, much more interested in the product that they're selling. So I thought, I've got to get into this. But because I love recruitment as well, I decided, okay, well, how about marrying both recruitment and then a specialism into HotelTech, and saw that it is a niche and it's something that's needed. There's not many recruiters in the world globally that specialize into this. So that's what I've done. And I know a lot of people who might be listening to this are thinking of a career change. The way I did it was write a list of pros and cons. And look, for me, it was, apart from the things that I said before, was that I missed sales. I was doing operations for quite a few years, but I missed the fun of doing and the sort of, can't say the pressure, but it's almost like a roller coaster when you're getting a deal done or not, it breaks through. It's just more exciting than operations. Always fascinated in hotel technologies. I've written this down to make sure I didn't miss anything, but I wanted more freedom and the ability to work from wherever I was, whereas operations, you're stuck to the ground. There's a lot of travel involved. But also, I'm recently married to my Brazilian wife, who's a psychologist who also works remotely. So it made sense for me to get a remote role as well. And here we are. I'm a recruiter, headhunter that specializes in hotel technology.
That is a phenomenal story. I'm thinking, so funny enough, in November, in November on our show, we're doing founder stories, but this is actually a phenomenal story because it really shows how we can change and evolve. And now I'm thinking, gosh, you and your wife are like power couple because you guys can do so much together. But tell me this then. So now you've really seen technology from ground up in all of these different projects you've been involved in, and now you're hiring for these roles. And I would imagine when you have a tech company come to you, are they educating you on their platform? Are you first learning about them? How does that work before you go out and recruit for them?
Yeah, whenever I speak to a potential client, so anyone in HotelTech, if you can imagine the hotel tech stack from PMS to RMS to all the outsider things like key systems, and I always ask for a demo. so that I properly understand what they're selling. And that gives
Right.
me kind of an advantage compared to other recruiters when they go to candidates. So when I connect with candidates, I know what buttons to press. I know how to, I know how to not waste their time by saying, look, this product is better for enterprise clients, or this is better for independent hotels. This
Right.
a higher salary, but therefore a lower commission rate. And so, I understand the jargon that they're going to be interested in, as well as in the world that they're interested in. And I'll put my own point of view as well. Like if I think it's a great product, then I will tell them, and I'll tell them the reasons why. And I think that's what makes me stand out. But every client call that I have, or candidate call as well, I'm surprised by how much I learn every day. And when you think about it, there's almost no position in the world in this industry that gives better exposure to all the innovations happening in hotel tech. Literally,
Oh
because
yeah.
I'm speaking to CEOs, leadership candidates every day who sometimes have their own side projects as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you're really, I mean, it's a really phenomenal and actually very fascinating thing that you're doing, because you get to really, you have a very well-rounded view of our industry. And I'm curious what you think of this. So AI reshaping hospitality. I have two things to ask, but I'm going to start here. How do you think new roles are going to be shaped by AI? Like, what are you seeing right now as people are coming to you to help them hire?
So I just want to be clear. I don't pretend to have a crystal ball forecasting the future.
Yeah.
My main value is connecting the right talent in hotel tech. However, I'm going to give obviously my take of things. So
Yeah, we want
of
it.
course,
Yeah.
of course, everyone's talking about agentic AI, so I won't touch too much on that subject. But one that maybe not everyone has heard about yet is the HITL manager, which stands for Human in the Loop Manager. So it's a concept where you have an AI augmented and machine learning decision-making tool. I've written it down, so to bear with me. So that can master complex and multifaceted decision environments at a pace and volume that humans cannot achieve. So that's the tool. And there's a human at the end of that tool that verifies its decisions. So the human is supposed to bring that context and check decisions that make sense. It's on brand, it's on time, on budget, etc. Actually, this is a phenomenon that applies to every single industry. But since we're talking about hospitality, this transcends across the hotel tech stack, but also across the departments in a hotel. So I've written down some examples, but basically the human in this relationship with the AI or agentic AI, if you may, is the human is the strategic orchestrator, let's say, who ensures that every AI decision is effective, ethical. It's a huge topic at the moment, and it's aligned with your hotel's ultimate goals, profitability, and of course guest satisfaction. So, an example. The RMS flags a sudden surge in demands and suggests a 300% increase in your rates. So what the HITL manager will do is check the context of that. So if it's a Super Bowl, if the Super Bowl is next door, then it makes sense,
Makes
right?
sense. Right.
However, if it's a low revenue local event where the price would potentially alienate the community, that would create a PR nightmare. And that's where the HITL manager will make sure that the AI doesn't make that decision. So humans are mega important. If anyone's scared of being made redundant, think again, because you can really give some context to make sure it doesn't do anything. My last point on that is that I don't think the responsibility of this person just lays on the general manager. I think it will be spread across departments. And I think it's actually very good for the hospitality industry as a whole, because everyone knows it's hard to keep staff on board. But I think if a hotel has a program in place to teach how to effectively use AI, then I think you have a stronger potential of keeping people on board and reducing your churn rate of staff.
Yeah.
Another topic of the future of hotel tech, I would say, is the security topic. I know a lot of people have mentioned that, but today HotelTech systems, they're not the most secure, and as a consequence, you could have, the consequences are huge. You could have data breaches, to RMSs getting hacked and to increasing daily rates by, let's say, 1,000%, which could ruin the reputation.
Yeah.
So I won't say too much on that topic because I don't know enough about it. I'm not an expert in it, but that's what I keep hearing more and more, and that's an opportunity. So for anyone in HotelTech who's looking for opportunities to set up a new business, it's a potential thing to talk about and think about. Someone that I definitely recommend anyone follows on LinkedIn is Mihai Bote. He's the smartest guy I know with his no bullshit approach. He's a real thought leader on anything that has to do with AI and hospitality. This guy's finishing up one of the highest courses from Berkeley, one of the best schools
Wow.
for AI.
Yeah.
I mean, he's sitting next to people who work for the Pentagon, just to give you an idea. I don't know anyone in hospitality that understands AI as he does. So yeah,
Okay.
follow him.
We'll
I
follow.
actually catch up several times a month with him just to make sure I know what's going on.
What's going on? Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's my take on the future of HotelTech.
That's really smart. I mean, and I will follow, and in fact, we'll try to include that here in the recap of our session. But I have another question for you, and we didn't actually talk about this in the pre-show because I just saw it, and I wanted to get your take on this. So Muse, they came out in a post in the last few days and said that they have added, you may have seen this, because they get thousands of applicants, they've started using an AI interviewer to start. We all know this is a thing. And I think that, they were very bold in sharing that they're doing this and the reasons why, and that they know there can be hallucinations and here's how they're dealing with it. What do you think about AI when it comes to the interviewing process? I mean, that you really know what that process is like. Do you find that we are in a place right now, even not just industry, but as a society, where that is a helpful tool? Or do you think it can actually, and nothing, we don't have to speak for or against what Muse is doing, but just generally this technology, like what's your take on that from a recruiter's perspective?
I don't think it works for senior leadership roles, but I think it does work for below. And companies like Muse is the sexiest company in hotel tech.
Yes, it is.
A lot of people want to work for Muse. So, they have to deal with thousands of applications, and it's just humanly impossible. And I saw their CEO mention that, he was, I really appreciate how candid he is in all his posts.
Love
So
it.
he was saying how he would love to have one-on-one face-to-face interviews with all those people, but it's just humanly impossible. And it's a double-edged sword, because it's a good problem to have, and it's also a terrible problem to have, because the really good candidates might think, I can't be asked with, sorry my French, but I can't be bothered with doing this, with going through this application process. I just feel like cattle. I think it has its place, but if you're, see, I'm going to shamelessly say it's good to use a recruitment consultant, and so I think it's good to use both, because a recruitment consultant, they're always keeping their network in check. They're speaking to people every single day. Someone they spoke to a year ago, they can think about, have it in their own CRM system, and say that is the perfect candidate that matches the job description. They will get along with the hiring manager because of X, Y, and Z, et cetera, et cetera. That's where a recruiter can bring, an outsourced recruiter can bring their value. I mean, I'm not really answering your question, am I? I think it has its place.
Yeah, no, I mean, you are, because
we're in the beginning, and it's definitely going to get better. It's definitely going to get better. And it's a necessary evil for companies like Muse, who have so many applicants coming towards them.
Yeah. No, that's I actually think you answered that very well. And I'm curious, kind of as we finish out here, so we've talked about your story, which is so phenomenal. We've obviously talked about HotelTech and operations and all of that. Tell me a little bit before we end this on, getting the people side right. So there's recruiting, onboarding, all of that. Things are changing. what are like the common mistakes you're seeing right now in our industry with getting the people side right? And then do you have recommendations on how to remedy that and to do a better job? Because we know that retention right now is not great. And we also, I mean, for me, I'm like seeing so many layoffs that, it's just an interesting market right now. So how can our hiring managers and our companies get it right?
So it's a really good question. From what I've seen throughout my career, is setting the wrong expectations or not setting any expectations at all. I've made this mistake, and I've seen this mistake happen countless of times, especially with, in startups where, young people are given responsibilities for the first time, and you just have to make the mistake to learn from them. So what I mean is starting from day minus 30. So what I mean is the first point of contact with a candidate before they get a job, it's so important to set the expectations.
Right.
What you might have is what I've seen before is the internal recruiter or the hiring manager will say, in 1 year, I'm going to promote you to XYZ without saying anything. So the candidate can misinterpret that in many ways. They might think no matter what they do in 1 year, they're going to get a promotion. They might think that they're going to get a promotion in terms of salary and other compensation benefits and things like that. And I've done that in the very beginning of my years. The first hire that I did, I was like, I'm going to give you, 20% of the company's shares, realizing, oh my God, that's the stupidest thing to say in the world. And this was like a secretary who was also doing viewings for me at the time, and I said that within 1 year. So it's when it's about setting expectations, it's not just what's going to happen in the future. I think it's very important to say, we're a small company. We love to promote people from within. If the results are good, and let's be specific on those results, then we will look at promoting you. However, it's not just based on your results. It's also got to do with the financial stability of the company. If we manage to hit targets that are out of your reach. So unfortunately, even if you hit all your goals, we might not be able to promote you or give you, a higher salary because it depends on many other factors. And I think being that truthful and honest about that goes way further and gains way more trust than just saying, oh yeah, in 1 year's time, we're going to promote you. Yeah. So that's what I would say. And then, in terms of other expectations is you got to be very clear on what your values are, very clear on what you won't accept, but you also want to get feedback from the candidate. You want to ask the candidate, what are your boundaries? What are things you don't accept? And that these things are so important, especially in terms of culture. And the more truthful you get, the better. One thing I did when I was the director of launch at Numa is I would explain to the candidates the worst day possible in a day of the life of the role that they're applying for. So I would say, for example, if they're a project manager for a hotel, I say, look, 3 days before, you're going to be in the middle of August in Italy when no one works, and you're supposed to open a hotel in 3 days' time, but you don't have any running water, no internet, no gas, whatever. This is going to be a day in your life. How are you going to deal with that? You're going to be by yourself. You might not even speak the language that you're opening a hotel in.
Yeah.
Be very dusty. Mattresses can come like a day later. They might dump it right in front of the hotel and leave, which has happened to me before. So, and then when they say, yes, I'm ready to do that, then I know that when the time gets tough, I can tell them as a manager, say, look, we spoke about this before. I told you it was going to get tough. And they will say, yep, you're right. But if you don't talk about these tough days and it happens to it, the candidate's the employee is going to say to the employer, like, you never told me it was going to be this hard. Yeah. So I think it's really important to explain what the tough days are going to look like as well in terms of setting expectations.
That's a very good idea. I've never heard of that, actually. I think that's super smart.
So that's one thing. And then the second thing is poor onboarding. There are so many times where I've seen a great recruitment process, super well structured, expectations set and everything. And then on onboarding day, the person has no one to speak to. The internal recruiter doesn't know where they're supposed to be. They thought they had handed it over to the hiring manager. The hiring manager thought that the candidate, that the employee was supposed to receive their laptop already, when this should have been done the moment that the candidate has signed the contracts, and this comes down to a lack of project management, accountability, and responsibility. And I think, it just demands about maybe 1 hour of the internal recruiters, or especially the hiring manager's time. So I would spend probably an extra hour compared to any other hiring manager in the company in terms of onboarding. So I literally did, a presentation of what the first few weeks are going to look like, what my expectations are, what I want them to learn, who I want them to go to in order to learn, where are the resources. I was already in touch with HR to make sure they got their laptop on time and everything else they needed, like, a spending credit card and things like that. All these things are so important, because if these things are not done, then the employee thinks they don't give a shit about me. So excuse me French, but that's really what they're going to think. And it's the beginning moments that are so important, because in the first week or 2 weeks almost, that's usually when an employee decides if they're going to leave the company or not. So make as much effort as possible. The first month is absolutely critical.
It's really interesting. Like, what comes to my mind is, so I'm a millennial. I used to be the young one. Now I'm getting to be like the middle-aged one. But, when I was first hired for my career job in HotelTech, it was always about and it still is, but like, you better be perfect to impress your employer, and you don't take time off in the first year because you want to impress your employer. And now I think there's been a really interesting cultural shift, I think globally, where it's a lot more about how can your employer take care of you? How can they keep you and retain you? Whereas I think, in other generations, it was more about like this overemphasis on the employee being almost, I think, maybe taken advantage of. So what you're saying, I think, is a really nice shift, because it's a two-way street. It's a relationship between employee and company. And if the company hasn't covered their bases, there's nothing saying the employee has to stick around. And of course, we know it's an investment when you hire somebody, and there's an acquisition cost to hiring, I'm sure. So I think it's really interesting kind of what you're saying. And I think it's a nice mindset shift personally, and a good warning to companies to be prepared, to know what you need to do for the new person walking in the door.
Yeah, I can completely agree with you right there. And I think it's due to the age of reviews, online reviews. Now companies are getting reviewed on glassdoor.com. So, and you see a lot of people mentioning what the recruitment or the onboarding process is like. I think you get to review the CEO, if you believe in the CEO or not. So yeah, it's not easy to be an employer these days. You've really got to be holier than the Pope, as my ex-boss Christian Geyser said at Numa, which makes sense.
Well, Ed, this has been just so enlightening. I absolutely enjoyed every second of your story and just hearing your knowledge. I think you have so much to share. For those watching, I got to share this. So you have a fan here. I love Zoe. She just said you're a total pro. Love this. I know our audience was really excited about you coming on today. And for those watching live, or of course watching later on YouTube, feel free to share this episode with a friend. If you want to contact Ed, you can actually do so through Affixify, so we can connect you directly to Ed to learn more about his services. And Ed, we thank you so much. We are excited to follow your journey. And any parting words for the audience?
No, thank you so much. I think Affixify is a really great platform for HotelTech. I found a lot of value in it, and yeah, thank you for listening to my story. This was really fun. Thank you so much, Jasmine.
Thank you, and everybody, we'll be back next week. We'll see you guys next Wednesday. Have a great week.